An elderly Floridian called 911 on her cell phone to report that her car had been broken into. She is hysterical as she explains her situation to the dispatcher. "They've stolen the stereo, the steering wheel, the brake pedal, and even the accelerator," she cried. The dispatcher said, "Stay calm, an officer is on the way." A few minutes later, the officer radios in. "Disregard," he says. "She got in the back seat by mistake." Two elderly ladies had been friends for many decades. Over the years, they had shared all kinds of activities and adventures. Lately, their activities had been limited to meeting a few times a week to play cards. One day, they were playing cards when one looked at the other and said, "Now don't get mad at me. I know we've been friends for a long time, but I just can't think of your name. I've thought and thought, but I can't remember it. Please tell me what your name is." Her friend glared at her. For at least 3 minutes, she just stared and glared at her. Finally, she said, "How soon do you need to know?" A man is strolling past the mental hospital and suddenly remembers an important meeting. Unfortunately, his watch has stopped and he cannot tell if he is late or not. Then he notices a patient similarly strolling about within the hospital fence. Calling out to the patient, the man says, "Pardon me, sir, but do you have the time?" The patient calls back, "One moment," and throws himself upon the ground, pulling out a short stick as he does. He pushes the stick into the ground and, pulling out a carpenter's level, assures himself that the stick is vertical. With a pass, the patient locates north and with a steel ruler measures the precise length of the shadow cast by the stick. Withdrawing a slide rule from his pocket, the patient calculates rapidly, then swiftly packs up all his tools and turns back to the pedestrian, saying, "It is now precisely 3:29 p.m., provided today is August 16th, which I believe it is." The man can't help but be impressed by this demonstration and sets his watch accordingly. Before he leaves, he says to the patient, "That was really quite remarkable, but tell me, what do you do on a cloudy day or at night when the stick casts no shadow?" The patient holds up his wrist and says, "I suppose I just look at my watch." This morning, I was sitting on a bench next to a homeless man. I asked him how he ended up this way. He said, "Up until last week, I still had it all. I was a cook, my clothes were washed and pressed. I had a roof over my head. I had TV and internet. I went to the gym, the pool, the library. I could still go to school. Life was good." "What happened?" I asked. "Drugs? Alcohol? Divorce?" "Oh no, nothing like that," he said. No, I got out of prison." 4. A man buys a lie detector robot that slaps people who lie. He decides to test it at dinner. He asks his son, "Son, where were you today during school hours?" "At school." The robot slaps the son. "Okay, I went to the movies." The father asks, "Which one?" "Harry Potter." The robot slaps the son again. "Okay, I was watching Naughty America." The father replies, "What? When I was your age, I didn't even know what was that." The robot slaps the father. The mom chimes in, "Ha ha ha! After all, he is your son." The robot slaps the mother. In a small village, a young woman noticed something peculiar while relieving herself. Her urine formed 4 streams instead of 1. Worried and confused, she decided to visit the free medical camp set up in her town. Nervously, she explained her issue to the doctor. "Whenever I, go, it comes out in 4 streams. Is that normal?" The doctor, trying to keep a straight face, assured her he'd examine her thoroughly. After a careful check, the doctor smiled and said, "Well, no wonder it's splitting into 4 streams. There's a button with 4 holes stuck inside." An Arab sheikh was admitted to St. Vincent's Hospital for heart surgery, but prior to the surgery, the doctors needed to store his blood in case the need arises. As the gentleman had a rare type of blood, it couldn't be found locally, so the call went out to all the states. Finally, a Scot was located who had a similar blood type. The Scot willingly donated his blood for the Arab sheikh. After the surgery, the Arab sheikh sent the Scotsman as appreciation for giving his blood a new BMW, diamonds, and US dollars. Couple of days later, once again, the Arab sheikh had to go through a corrective surgery. His doctor telephoned the Scotsman, who was more than happy to donate his blood again. After the second surgery, the Arab sent the Scotsman a thank you card and a jar of candies. The Scotsman was shocked that the Arab sheikh this time did not reciprocate his kind gesture as he had anticipated. He phoned the Arab sheikh and asked him, "I thought you would be generous again, that you would give me a BMW, diamonds and money, but you only gave me a thank you card and a jar of candies." To this, the Arab sheikh replied, "Aye, but I now have Scottish blood in my veins." She was in the kitchen, getting ready to boil some eggs for breakfast. He walked in, and without hesitation, she turned and said, "I need you. Right now." His eyes lit up, thinking, "This is my lucky day." Without missing a beat, he swept her into his arms, and they enjoyed the moment fully, right there by the kitchen table. It lasted a total of 2 minutes. Afterward, with a smile, she simply said, "Thanks," and turned back to the stove. A little confused, he asked, "What was that all about?" She laughed softly and replied, "The egg timer's broken." My buddy's wife found out that their dog, a schnauzer, could hardly hear, so she took it to the veterinarian. The vet found that the problem was hair in the dog's ears. He cleaned both ears, and the dog could then hear fine. The vet then proceeded to tell her that if she wanted to keep this from recurring, she should go to the store and get some Nair hair remover and rub it in the dog's ears once a month. So she went to the drugstore and bought some Nair hair remover. At the register, the pharmacist told her, "If you're going to use this under your arms, don't use deodorant for a few days." She said, "I'm not using it under my arms." The pharmacist said, "If you're using it on your legs, don't use body lotion for a couple of days." She replied, "I'm not using it on my legs either. If you must know, I'm using it on my schnauzer." The pharmacist said, "Well, stay off your bicycle for at least a week. 9. Little Larry attended a horse auction with his father. He watched as his father moved from horse to horse, running his hands up and down as the horse's legs, rump and chest. After a few minutes, Larry asked, "Dad, why are you doing that?" His father replied, "Because I have to make sure that they are healthy and in good shape before I buy." Larry, looking worried, said, "Dad, I think Uncle Bob wants to buy Mom." Adam was talking to his friend at the bar and said, "I don't know what to get my wife for her birthday. She has everything, and besides, she can afford to buy anything she wants, so I'm stuck." His friend said, "I have an idea. Why don't you make up a certificate saying she can have 60 minutes to make passionate love any way she wants it? She'll probably be thrilled." Adam decided to take his friend's advice. The next day at the bar, his friend said, "Well, did you take my suggestion?" "Yes, I did," Adam replied. "Did she like it?" "Oh, yes. She jumped up, thanked me, kissed me on the forehead, and ran out the door yelling, 'Oh, I'll be back in an hour.'" A man and his wife never fought for 25 years of their marriage. A friend asked him how he had managed to make it possible. He narrated, "We went for our honeymoon in Australia 25 years ago, and while riding on a horse, my wife's horse jumped and my wife fell down. She got up, patted the horse's back, and said, 'This is your first time.' After a while, it happened again. She patted the horse again and said, 'This is your second time.' The horse did it again the third time. She brought out a gun and shot the horse dead. I was so shocked and I shouted at her, 'Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? Why did you kill the horse?' She smiled at me and said, 'This is your first time.' Since then, my mouth, Pim." The parrot was fully grown with a very bad attitude and a worse vocabulary. Every other word was profanity. Those that weren't profanity were, to say the least, rude. Alice tried to change the bird's attitude by constantly saying polite words and playing soft music. Anything she could think of, nothing worked. She yelled at the bird, and the bird got worse. She shook the bird, and the bird became even madder and ruder. Finally, in a moment of desperation, Alice put the parrot in the freezer to get a minute of peace. For a few moments, she heard the bird swearing, squawking, kicking, and screaming. Then, suddenly, there was absolute quiet. Alice was frightened that she might have actually hurt the bird and quickly opened the freezer door. The parrot slowly stepped out onto Alice's extended arm. Perfectly calm, the parrot said, "I am very sorry that I offended you with my language and my actions, and I ask your forgiveness. I will endeavor to correct my behavior, and I am sure it will never happen again." Alice was astounded at the changes in the bird's attitude and was about to ask what had changed him when the parrot continued, "May I ask what the chicken did?" A guy stuck his head into a barber shop and asked, "How long before I can get a haircut?" The barber looked around the shop full of customers and said, "About 2 hours." The guy left. A few days later, the same guy stuck his head in the door and asked, How long before I can get a haircut? The barber looked around at the shop and said, About 3 hours. The guy left. A week later, the same guy stuck his head in the shop and asked, How? Long before I can get a haircut? The barber looked around the shop and said, About an hour and a half. The guy left. The barber turned to his friend and said, Hey Bob, do me a favor. Follow him and see where he goes. He keeps asking how long he has to wait for a haircut, but he never comes back. A little while later, Bob returned to the shop, laughing hysterically. The barber asked, So, where does he go when he leaves? Bob looked up, wiped the tears from his eyes, and said, Your house. 14. A few years back, in a small Texas town, the local madam also operated the local telephone service. When the police finally arrested her, they found her book of talent. Each police officer was then assigned to investigate some girls from her book. After a week, the chief summoned each cop to report his findings. Detective Smith, what did you learn about the hookers on your list? Chief, I'm sorry, but I need to disqualify myself, said Smith. One of the women I interviewed is 84 years old and so charming that I have fallen in love with her. Damn it, boy, shouted the chief. I'm surprised at you. You've been a cop for 25 years, and here you go, falling for the oldest trick in the book. A precious little girl walks into a pet shop and asks in the sweetest little lisp, Excuse me, mister, do you keep waddling rabbits? As the shopkeeper's heart melts, he gets down on his knees so that he's on her level and asks, Do you want a waddle white webby or a theft and fuzzy black webby? Or maybe one like that cute waddle brown webby over there? She, in turn, blushes, rocks on her heels, puts her hands on her knees, leans forward, and says in a quiet voice, I don't think my pet python really gives a thought. A high school recently was faced with a unique problem. A number of the girls were beginning to use lipstick and would put it on in the bathroom. That was fine, but after they put on their lipstick, they would press their lips to the mirror, leaving dozens of little lip prints. Every night, the maintenance man would remove them, and the next day the girls would put them back. Finally, the principal decided that something had to be done. She called all the girls to the bathroom and met them there with the maintenance man. She explained that all of these lip prints were causing a major problem for the maintenance man, who had to clean the mirrors every night. To demonstrate how difficult it had been to clean the mirrors, she asked the maintenance man to show the girls how much effort was required. He took out a long-handled squeegee, dipped it in the toilet, and cleaned the mirror with it. Since then, there have been no lip prints on the mirror. There are teachers, and then there are educators. A guy walks into a doctor's office with a 5-iron wrapped around his neck and 2 black eyes. What happened to you? Asked the doctor. Well, it all started when my wife and I were golfing, and by accident she hit the ball into a cow pasture. When we went to investigate, I saw the ball in a cow's egg. I went and lifted the tail of the cow, and that's when I made my mistake. The doctor looked puzzled and asked, What mistake was that? I said, "Hey, this looks like yours, hun." A husband and wife and their 2 sons are watching TV. She looks at her husband and winks at him. He gets the message and says, "Excuse us for a few minutes, boys. We're going up to our room for a little while." Pretty soon, one of the boys becomes curious, goes upstairs and sees the door to his parents' bedroom is ajar. He peeks in for a few minutes, trots downstairs, gets his little brother, and takes him up to peek into the bedroom. "Before you look in there," he says, "keep in mind, this is the same woman who smacked our ass just for our thumbs." 2 blondes decided to learn how to play golf. On her first swing, the first ball connected with the ball, but it flew way off course and hit another golfer, who immediately hunched over, clasped both hands to his groin, and rolled onto the grass moaning in agony. The blonde was horrified and ran to him. She told him, "I'm so sorry, I'm a massage therapist, though so I know that I can help you." She gently pulled his hands away from his groin and began to gently rub the area. This went on for a few minutes while her patient became more relaxed with every minute. Finally, she asked if he was feeling better. He responded, "Yeah, I feel fantastic now, but I still think my thumbs are broken." The captain called the sergeant in. "Sarge, I just got a telegram that Private Jones' mother died yesterday. You better go tell him and send him in to see me." So the sergeant calls for his morning formation and lines up all the troops. "Listen up, men," says the sergeant. "Johnson, report to the mess hall for KP. Smith, report to personnel to sign some papers. The rest of you men, report to the motor pool for maintenance. Oh, by the way, Jones, your mother died. Report to the commander." Later that day, the captain called the sergeant into his office. "Hey, Sarge, that was a pretty cold way to inform Jones his mother died. Couldn't you be a bit more tactful next time?" "Yes, sir," answered the Sarge. A few months later, the captain called the sergeant in again and says, "Sarge, I just got a telegram that Private McGrath's mother died. You'd better go tell him and send him in to see me. This time be more tactful." So the sergeant calls for his morning formation. "Okay, men. Fall in and listen up. Everybody with a mother, take 2 steps forward. Not so fast, McGrath." 3 sisters, ages 92, 94, and 96, live in a house together. One night, the 96-year-old draws a bath. She puts her foot in and pauses. She yells to the other sisters, "Was I getting in or out of the bath?" The 94-year-old yells back, "I don't know. I'll come up and see." She starts up the stairs and pauses. "Was I going up the stairs or down?" The 92-year-old is sitting at the kitchen table having tea and listening to her sisters. She shakes her head and says, "I sure hope I never get that forgetful knock on wood." She then yells, "I'll come up and help both of you as soon as I see who's at the door." A senior citizen drove his brand new Porsche convertible out of the dealership in Butte, Montana. Taking off down the road, he floored it to 80 miles per hour, enjoying the wind blowing through what little hair he had left. Amazing, he thought, as he flew down I-90, pushing the pedal even more. Looking in his rearview mirror, he saw the highway patrol behind him. Blue lights flashing and siren blaring. He floored it to 100 miles per hour, then 110, then 120. Suddenly he thought, "What am I doing? I'm too old for this," and pulled over to await the trooper's arrival. Pulling in behind him, the trooper walked up to the Porsche, looked at his watch and said, "Sir, my shift ends in 30 minutes. Today is Friday. If you can give me a reason for speeding that I've never heard before, I'll let you go." The old gentleman paused and then said, "Years ago, my wife ran off with a state trooper. I thought you were bringing her back." "Have a good day, sir," replied the trooper. After a week, the man came to his pastor with a big problem. "When I go to bed, I can't sleep because I'm afraid of monsters under my bed. I know it's silly, but I can't help it." The pastor recommended prayer, reading the Bible, singing hymns, and keeping the lights on. But nothing worked. One Sunday, the man came to church, happy and well-rested. He got the answer from his friend, the carpenter. "He told me just to cut the legs off the bed." Two elderly women were out driving in a large car. Both could barely see over the dashboard. As they were cruising along, they came to an intersection. The stoplight was red, but they just went on through. The woman in the passenger seat thought to herself, "I must be losing it. I could have sworn we just went through a red light." After a few more minutes, they came to another intersection, and the light was red again. Again, they went right through. The woman in the passenger seat was almost sure that the light had been red, but was really concerned that she was losing it. She was getting nervous. At the next intersection, sure enough, the light was red, and they went on through. So, she turned to the other woman and said, "Sue, do you know that we just ran through 3 red lights in a row? You could have killed us both." Sue turned to her and said, "Oh crap, am I driving?" A little boy and a little girl attended the same school and became friends. Every day they would sit together to eat their lunch. They discovered that they both brought chicken sandwiches every day. This went on all through the 4th and 5th grades, until one day he noticed that her sandwich wasn't a chicken sandwich. He said, "Hey, how come you're not eating chicken? Don't you like it anymore?" She said, "I love it, but I have to stop eating it." "Why?" he asked. She pointed to her lap and said, "'Cause I'm starting to grow little feathers down there." "Let me see," he said. "Okay," and she showed him. He looked and said, "That's right, you are. Better not eat any more chicken." He kept eating his chicken sandwiches until one day he brought peanut butter. He said to the little girl, "I have to stop eating chicken sandwiches. I'm starting to get feathers down there too." She asked if she could look, so he showed her. She said, "Oh my God, it's too late for you. You've already got the neck and giblets."
Still smiling? Don't let it stop. Subscribe for more jokes that'll keep you going.